Welcome to your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand with Lisa McGuire. Many industry experts have opportunities to speak, but they waste it when they don't engage with their audience. We've all been on the receiving end of a presentation. You know, the one with the talking head that reads every word of the slides. David Doerrier is a dynamic professional speaker, trainer, and coach with over 25 years of experience in the field of training and development, leadership, and communication. He takes complex ideas and breaks them down into simple concepts. It's no wonder he's a sought-after speaker. He has this refreshing ability to connect with his audience. Join us for today's episode, where you can learn how to leverage your expertise and deliver an impactful presentation as well. Welcome to your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand with Lisa McGuire, the show where we talk about how to do the work you love, have the business you were created to build, and attract others by being your authentic self. Have you ever felt a pull on your heart that you have something more to give to the world? How can you leverage years of experience and your why into your next act? And finally, isn't it time to pull back the curtain to share who you are and start building the relationships you need to stand out in the marketplace? Our world is in the midst of a reawakening to chase after what you were created to do. Join us weekly to hear stories, strategies, and from those who have made the big leap into a life of meaningful work. Welcome to your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand, David Doerrier. We are so excited to have this conversation today about things that all of us need help on. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. It is a blast to be here with you. It has been quite a while since we've met. So many years ago, the last time we met, and I've been following you on LinkedIn and your podcast, and this is a pleasure to finally be a guest on your podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I know our listeners are going to be excited to hear some of the golden nuggets you're going to drop with us today, because one thing I know is many of us that are industry experts or consider ourselves to be that, we are often asked to speak. We're often asked to make presentations or to do lunch and learns or whatever it may be, even a keynote presentation. And so we take that industry expert image and have to convey and transfer it to a stage. And we think it's all about knowledge and what we can show that we know. But today, you're going to make us think a little bit differently, aren't you?
I hope so. Yes, because I really do hope so. Because those are the folks that I work with. I love working with smart people who are open to new ideas on how to do a better job of engaging and captivating their audience's attention.
All right. So you just teed it up perfectly for me. So tell me what audience engagement is. Is it looking at their posture and everyone's sitting on the edge of your seat? Like, what does audience engagement look like?
Well, that's a great question. Audience engagement is more about how the presenter is presenting the information to engage the audience. There are a number of ways that the presenter, facilitator, trainer, keynote speaker can use to engage their audience. Now, yes, what you've described is certainly one way of the presenter interpreting whether or not their engagement principles are actually working. The audience is leaning in, the audience is reacting in some way, they're participating, waving their hands, standing up, doing things, getting involved in group activities and so on. That's certainly ways to evaluate whether or not it's working. But from my standpoint, it's more about what is the presenter doing to make sure that the audience is engaged and remains engaged throughout the entire presentation.
All right. Well, you just opened a great story loop for us, but I'd like to get a little bit of background on how did you become interested in this work? So give us a little bit of your authority building, where your expertise is in this area.
Well, that's another great question. This career field found me when I grew up as a shy, pimply kid on Long Island, New York. Really had, the only passion that I had at that time was radio. I went to bed every night with a little transistor radio under my pillow, For those that know Long Island, WBAB, the old WNEW from New York, and AOR station, album-oriented rock station, went to bed every night just fascinated with radio. And it was always remaining in the back of my mind. So that was one thing that I was fascinated with. But let me jump back again. When I graduated high school, the only thing I knew that I didn't want to do was to go to college. But I did go into the military, and I'm glad, because I love to work. I'm not a very good learner. I'm not a good book reader. So I went into the military, and that really opened my eyes, opened my opportunities to many different things. And one of the things that the military brought to me was, when I was stationed on Guam, I had an opportunity to go visit a radio station. And within a week, I was on the air at that radio station. Still have my first recording of that. Sound very different today than I did back then. But I'm trying to make this story short because a lot of these things kind of led into each other. So I came off active duty after 10 years in the Air Force to pursue my fame and fortune in radio. Found some of the fame, but none of the fortune. Luckily, I stayed in the reserves. I was in radio for 12 years. And then the reserves offered me a full-time job here at Dobbins Air Force Base to be a trainer for folks, reservists that were coming into our career field, air transportation. We loaded everything and anything you can imagine on all types of military and civilian cargo and transport aircraft. I love working around planes. I love the smell of jet fuel. In 1995, that's when I started my career in training and development, stayed with the military until 2004, then started working with civilian organizations and their training departments, continuing to design training, deliver training, and then eventually started training trainers to training CEOs, managers, leaders to be better presenters, better facilitators, better trainers, how to be a better presenter at the conference that's coming up or running a breakout session. And I found that I really loved that part of my job in the training and development field. And I've been a part of Toastmasters for almost 30 years and mentoring folks. So long story short, the career fields kind of found me along the way. And today my full-time business is, like I said, working with smart people and helping them to take that smart information and making it easy for their audience to comprehend, understand, and remember.
You know, one thing I always love when I have guests on the show, David, is to hear their journey of little nuggets of some of their brilliance that comes through this listening to a radio when you're not even out of school yet. Just that kind of plant seeds into where you ended up today. So as you talk about your company, you speak about it. It's called Present Your Way to Success. And if you're not watching this on video, this is audio, David has a sign behind him that says, "Talking and telling ain't training or selling." And David, that's a great phrase. Tell us a little bit about how you came up with that. What does that mean?
Well, that's another great question. Yeah, talking and telling ain't training or selling. So this goes back to something that you had said during the introduction about people, business owners that are many times asked to get up and speak in front of an audience. And many of them struggle with trying to convey their message in a way that's easy for the audience to understand. So just getting up and just flapping your gums and talking and telling people something doesn't necessarily equal effective training or selling, because it has to be engaging. Just getting up and just talking is not all about presenting in front of an audience. There's a structure to the way the presentation has to be put together. There has to be engagement in it. There has to be a number of principles along with effective stage presence.
All right. So, immediately what comes to mind is many thought leaders or industry experts are thinking, I am here. People want to hear what I have to say as far as my knowledge. I'm here to share my knowledge. I'm here to teach them. And in the past, and this is one thing I love, if If you've ever played sports, then you think you know how to coach. If you've ever sat in the classroom, you think you know how to teach. But if you are aware of even what's happening in education over the last 10 or so years, what they have found is classrooms were set up to train factory workers, right? You will sit in rows, you will do what you are told, and we're going to tell you, the sage on the stage. But as they started exploring a little further, they found out that children don't learn quite as well when they're being talked at. They learn better when they are engaged. So for that industry expert who has to, let's say, for instance, give a webinar, okay? You're coming on the webinar. I've got to teach you some things so you understand why you might want to take the next step. How can that industry expert begin to look at it's not just delivering content? What vision do you paint for them of what their presentation needs to look like?
Well, a few things. Let's use that example of that industry expert that's going to be teaching their audience something. First of all, is that industry expert, the first thing that they need to think about is, what is the objective of this presentation or this training? That when we get to the very end of it, what should the audience know better? What should they be able to do better? What is the next step that they should be able to take? That is where the presentation, any speech, needs to start with the objective first. Now that that industry leader who's going to be doing this training understands that when we get to the end of this training, I'll use me as the example, when we get to the end of this training, my audience should know three things. They should know that it's important to know their audience. It's important to incorporate stories into their presentations. And it's also important that the presenter has a compelling conclusion of some sort. So now that I know that those are the three objectives, that now becomes my introduction. Today, we're going to learn knowing your audience, stories, and compelling conclusion. But part of that introduction also needs to include also needs to include setting the stage. Why are we here? What are we doing? What is the purpose? When we get to the end, you're going to gain these nuggets of information because the audience is looking for the WIIFM. What's in it for me? And if the audience doesn't understand what's in it for them, then they're going to tune out. So if the presenter just gets up and just starts talking about me, I, if it's all of that, that's great. All of the things, all of the experiences that have brought me to where I am today are great. They're important because I've learned from all of those things, but I have to think about, how does that benefit my audience? How does my audience gain any knowledge from that? They're not learning about those three things: audience, stories, and conclusion. So long story short, start with your conclusion first. That also becomes your opening, creating a compelling, setting the stage, and giving your audience the WIIFM. What's in it for them? What's in it for me?
Oh, I love so much about that. I'm all about customer-centric stories and really inviting your customer in the story of what it's going to be like to engage with you over this next time. But I also hear, so many people don't do this when they are producing content, whether it's spoken, whether it's a podcast episode, whatever it is. They don't think about, where do you want to end up? And they find themselves, they get the strong start or a really solid middle, and then they drift out at the end. They don't have a call to action. They don't tell people what to do next, and then they're left wondering. So what I hear you say, David, is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes. Right there. That's a basic. Yes.
All right. Okay. So let's go into starting this. What's a great way to pull the audience in to start? Do you stand up and introduce yourself and say, it's great to be here today? Thanks so much for having me. The weather's nice. Like, what's a compelling start? Because I know a lot of people do that, and you're sitting there just like, get to the point, right?
Right. Exactly. So let me say this, that there are probably there are 9 million ways to open a presentation, but all of them have the same objective. And that is that you need to immediately captivate your audience's attention. You need to immediately get them to lean in, to think, to be engaged. So if you can introduce yourself at the very beginning and make it all about you, and that gets them to lean in and that gets them to be engaged, then great. Then use that. What I like to use, and again, there's 9 million ways of creating an opening. I like to ask a question at the beginning and to get my audience. Well, the question does a couple of things. Number one, it gets my audience to think. It gets them possibly, because for those folks that aren't seeing the visual, I'm raising my hand. How many people, asking them, how many people here have a fear of speaking in public? So now I got my audience to raise their hands, or for those that have a fear, and the ones that didn't raise their hands probably are lying.
Yes.
And at least I got them to think, but it's also giving me an opportunity to gauge the experience level of my audience many times, because number one is to know your audience. And many times people will ask, well, how do you know your audience? You know, you've walked into the room, you have no idea who these people are. There's several ways of knowing your audience. And one of them is to poll them with questions that are relevant at the beginning. How many people here have worked with this software, have worked with this process? You could follow up those questions with, well, because you worked with that software, what was your experience with that software? Was it good? So there are questions that you can ask up front to evaluate your audience. So answering your question is finding that the objective is no matter what opening you use, you need to get them to lean in, to want more. You know, a visual might work, a very compelling visual, a very dramatic visual of some sort. It needs to relate to your topic. It can also be a statistic of some sort. Did you know that 93% of your message comes from your nonverbals? So do you know what your body is telling your audience? So you could use something like that as well.
Yeah, something that could be even very polarizing, where people hear it and makes them kind of, oh, I never thought of that. Just to, right. To kind of get them out of that loop of numbness that we tend to put ourselves in. Now, I think that's really great, David. I think it's good to that. So, you know, if we're thinking about training, I see that very different than giving a keynote presentation where perhaps you're there to inspire or entertain. Do the rules change based on either of those?
That's a great question. My background is coming from training, and the principles that I've used to train people, because my objective as a trainer is to convey information and convey it in an engaging enough way that my audience is going to be able to retain that information and go back to their workstation. Now could be a virtual workstation of some sort, but be able to use that new information immediately when they get back to their desk. So the only way that I can do that is I need to be able to set the stage properly. I need to get them engaged. They need to understand the WIIFM. There needs to be engagement throughout the entire training session and a compelling conclusion of some sort. Now, so how is that different than a keynote speech? There are a lot of similarities. The keynote is trying to captivate their audience's attention. They want to engage them. They want to be memorable when they get to the end. So there are similar principles that are used. Now, in a training situation, I can have a lot of engagement of questions and answers and involvement with my audience, but you can do some of that same thing with your audience by telling stories. And now you can get your audience engaged by, in their head, they're visualizing the story, the individuals you're talking about, the places, the smells, the sounds, whatever is part of your story. So there is that engagement. So I think basically there is the same objective: captivating the audience, keeping them with you engaged throughout the entire presentation, and having some sort of a compelling conclusion where you're memorable.
Right. And, as I hear you speak, I also think about how important a part that emotions play in this. Mm. When we sit and hear a story, I've done some work in storytelling, but when we all sit in a room and listen to a story, they've done studies that there is heart coherence amongst the people in the room hearing the story at the same time, because we are all in what is called, it's a narrative transportation, right? So as soon as you say, I have a story to tell you, or you start into a story, immediately the human part of us, which is naturally problem solvers, we listen in, okay, who is the character? What do they want? And what's getting in the way? And we think, what would I do in that situation, right? So that engagement that comes in that you talk about, and the story is really inviting people to come into that story with you.
Right. And yes. And a good speech is going to do that, is going to invite us in, is going to let us be a part of that speech, that presentation, that training, whatever it is. And that's the number one feedback that I give to new presenters, especially in Toastmasters. And in no way, shape, or form is this a negative at all, because Toastmasters is a great place to start learning the craft of presenting. And here, one of my evaluation points many times is need to recraft this to bring us in. It's not just data. Don't just give us data that's happening, and don't tell us the story only from your perspective. Bring us in. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever experienced this? Well, what would you do if you were faced with this same situation? Bring us into those stories.
Right. And no longer are they spectators, but they are participants now, is what I hear.
That's great. Yes. I like the way you put that.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, one thing that we do want to get to, because this is part of the knowledge you bring to this, David, is the thing that you call adult learning theory. Now, I've been an educator all of my life. Of course, it was children. It was K through 12. But adult learning theory, what happens to us from when we were children till we become adults? Do we learn differently?
Well, I've only trained adults. I have not worked with children, and my wife and I don't have any children. What I have learned from educators that have worked with children, the difference between children and adults: children, when they're in school, that is their full-time job, so to speak.
Yes.
And yes, they have distractions, but adults have many, many more distractions. And this is learning something new, unless they're going to college or something like that. Learning something new in the organization is not their full-time job. They've got those full-time job responsibilities: the family, the budget, the car that's in the shop, the dog that's sick, whatever is going on. So they have a lot of distractions. So what's most important, the adult learning theory is all about creating engagement with your adult participant. The adult learning theory comes from my years as a trainer. These are principles that I used when I was training, and it also became the principles that were the foundation of training subject matter experts to be trainers, and now using the same principles to help them write their presentations and also to use on stage as well. So it's all about creating engagement with your audience.
All right. Very good. So as you work with these industry experts, and we've heard those are your ideal clients as you're working with them, what are some common hurdles that you see, some consistent things that are probably one of the toughest things to handle? Is it fear of public speaking?
Well, that certainly is a part of it. Yes. Yes. So let's talk about the fear. Being anxious, being fearful of speaking in public. If you are nervous, guess what? You're normal, because everybody gets nervous. And if people say that they're not nervous, then I'm wondering if they're trying hard enough. Everybody gets nervous. I would imagine that even the most skillful speakers, keynote speakers, would get nervous before they came out on stage. However, as professional speakers, we have built a foundation of how to work through that, how to eliminate that once we get on stage. And one of the ways, something I said earlier, is to go out and ask a question of your audience. So now that I've asked a question, now I've taken the focus off of me. The focus is on my audience. They're doing something. I'm getting centered on the stage. I'm becoming more relaxed on the stage. So there's many, many ways that speakers will release that tension. Moving your arms. You don't want to be a ping pong ball on the stage either. You want to stand in the center of the stage, but you want to be using your body, using your vocal variety, and all of that is going to help to dissipate that nervousness from your body. But being nervous is normal. Your audience wants you to be successful. There is usually only one person in that room that feels that presentation is going to fail. Do you have any idea who that one person is in the room that feels it's going to fail?
I know who that is. That is the person speaking.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's the only one. This is a room full of 100 people, 50 people, 10 people, 5 people, whatever it is, they all want you to be successful. So just keep in mind, being nervous, and let's change that. Let's reframe that. You're not nervous. You're excited. I am excited to present this information to my audience because they both feel the same.
Yes. And, I can remember even sophomore year of college, Tuesday, Thursday, spring semester, I had speech class, had 5 speeches to give. And before every one, I would become physically ill. Now, I was training to be a teacher. How did I expect I wasn't going to get nervous before I got up in front of a group of people? So I did exactly that, David. I took, and anytime I speak, I get really excited to speak. And then right before it happens, I think, what was I thinking? Why did I decide to do this? That uncomfortable feeling, but exactly what you said, everyone in there wants to see you succeed. Nobody wants to sit and watch a speaker that's not engaging.
Right.
And so serving them by using that energy and that excitement to show you're passionate about it. I think one of the most magnetic things about people is when they talk about what they love, it just draws people in. So yeah, I really, really do appreciate that. So David, what types of businesses or business leaders, are there particular industries that you tend to work with more than others? Or, as you're continuing with your business, kind of what's current for you now?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. I'm pretty much business agnostic because all presenters are all looking for the same thing. They have reached a point in their career where they have recognized that several things may be going on. Number one, the presentation that they've been making is not getting the impact that they were hoping for. They're not getting the results at the end of the presentation that they were hoping for. Maybe they need to work through that nervousness because that's holding them back. They know they need to get up on that stage because the only way that they can be successful is getting out in front of large numbers of people, but that fear is holding them back. One of the other groups of people that I like to work with are trainers. Here, in many instances, trainers have been promoted into that role. Let's talk about that corporate trainer. That corporate trainer has been promoted into that role many times because of their subject knowledge and not because of their ability to engage an audience. They're the ones that's where the talking and telling ain't training or selling came from, because I've experienced that when I was in corporate. They struggle with several things. They feel that just get up and just vomit all this information, and that's training. So the trainers, corporate trainers, business owners that now want to create a workshop for the first time, and that smart person that is not getting the results that they were looking for, as well as the individual that the fear is holding them back.
So let's say someone does fit into one of those categories and says, David, I think I really would benefit from working with you because, it's lost time. Anytime you get up and give a presentation, you haven't done that, you're not fully serving your audience and you're really shortchanging yourself. So let's say they decide to work with you. What does that look like? What does working with David look like on that?
Great question. So my coaching is tailored for each individual and also for each group to make sure that I'm meeting their objectives. So the first thing I want to know is, what is your objective? Who are you going to be speaking to? What are you going to be speaking about? Why are you going to be speaking on this subject? I can work with anyone, even if they don't have a presentation coming up. We can still talk about the foundational skills, but I really enjoy working with people that have a deadline, that they know I've got to make this presentation next month in front of this audience and for this amount of time. Those are the ones that I really like to work with, because now we've got something to shoot for. And where I start with that is what I mentioned earlier, is what is the objective? What is it that you want your audience to walk away with? So as I said, it's all about understanding your objectives, seeing where you are on your current path of speaking, because some people may have quite a bit of experience already, have already worked through the nervousness. So we don't have to really focus on that. Maybe understand the foundational skills of speaking, and maybe it's more about reformatting the presentation so it has more engagement in it. So it's all tailored for the individual.
And that's great, because that way they really do have it customized. It's fine-tuned for what they need. So David, if somebody is interested in working with you, what would be the next step?
First step would be to go to my website, presentyourwaytosuccess.com. There are a number of buttons all over my website where you can set up a 30-minute one-on-one consultation or a one-on-one discovery call with me. And even during those 30 minutes, many times I give away some tips and tricks. If we find that at the end of those 30 minutes, you would like to work with me, I have a number of different coaching plans that will fit your budget and also fit your time frames. I also give discounts to veterans, because being retired Air Force, veterans, to first responders, to students, as well as teachers.
All right. Very good. All right. So we will put all of those information, all of those links in the show notes to have for people. So if you're driving, just check back on your podcast app a little bit later, or walking, but we'll definitely have that information in there for you. So David, thank you so much for sharing your information with us, making us think differently. Than it's more than about regurgitating facts. It's really serving your audience in a way that it's going to help them, right?
Oh yeah. It's not about you. It's about what can you do, or what can you bring to your audience that will benefit them.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
There you have it. Think about it. We spend years in our professional development, earning degrees, training for certifications for the credibility to be seen as a subject matter expert or industry authority. You're recognized for the expert that you are, and then you leave it to chance with an underwhelming presentation. I'm a big believer that if you do the work to get there, you have a responsibility to stay there or grow beyond. Creating a compelling presentation is not only a way to serve your credibility in your business, it's also the ultimate way to help your audience move forward. Speaking of moving forward, have you heard about the big news? I've launched a modern newsletter to help people move from where they are to beyond to where they believe they can be. The gap between the two is called the So Much More. If you subscribe, I can promise you one idea at a time content delivered to your inbox when there's something valuable to say. No longer do you have to continue on the road to burnout and chaos. You have a choice to live a life of so much more. I'll see you here next week when we'll meet someone who has taken the human approach to cultivating his personal brand. Until then, go after your passion and use the strength of your purpose when things start getting challenging. It's all part of the journey on the way to your legendary self.